Hi, this is Listen and Be Heard for readers and writers. And today we have a wonderful guest who has recently written a book on the craft of fiction, David Jauss. I'm going to, before we introduce, or actually before we talk to David, I'm going to just read from his biography. This book was published by Press 53, based in Winston-Salem. David is the author of four collections of short stories, and his short stories have been published in numerous magazines and reprinted in such anthologies as Best American Short Stories, the O. Henry Awards, Prize Stories, and the Pushcart Prize, Best of the Small Presses, as well as the Pushcart Book of Short Stories. He's a recipient of the NEA, National Endowment of the Arts Fellowship, and a James A. Missioner Copernicus Society of America Fellowship. He's also an educator. He's taught at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock and in the low residency MFA in writing program at Vermont College of Fine Arts, which happens to be my alma mater. David Jauss, welcome to Listen
Congratulations.
and Be Heard. How are you today?
I'm doing fine, thanks.
Um, you know, Words made flesh. The thing that kind of popped out at me just in the immediacy was just the title itself.
Mhm.
Tell us about how you came upon that.
Well, first of all, I guess I could use it without getting permission from the author. Words made words made flesh, obviously, is taken from the Bible.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
but it really just sums up what I think fiction writing is all about, which is to take something that's inherently abstract, like, little black marks on a white page, and make the reader feel like it's happened and it's happening. Um, See, that to me is the goal of everything. And I have as one of the um, ep- epigraphs for the poem, Flannery O'Connor's comment that fiction is an incarnational art. It's the art of making the word into the flesh. And I fully believe that.
I see. I came across your book um, at the North Carolina Writers Network conference that just happened in Greensboro in October. Now, it's published by Press 53 out of Winston-Salem. I know a lot of authors, such as I think Clint McCown, who also teaches or taught or teaches currently at Vermont
And
College, also has a book on craft there. How is it working with Press 53?
I love it. I've worked with small presses, university presses, big presses, commercial presses, but far and away my best experience has been working with Kevin Morgan Watson and Press 53. Uh, they've done four of my books now, and I just trust them very much. I get great advice from Kevin.
Yeah, because I was at their table and I saw your book and I said, I gotta I gotta pick this up. In the book you say that 90% of fiction takes place in the off hours. Can you elaborate on that for our listeners? Because that just seems so spot on, you know?
No, yeah, it's an unfortunate fact. Um, it seems like in most works we never see anybody actually doing work. We never see them on the job. They might We might be told that they have this certain job, but all the action takes place away from the workplace. I had a student once years ago who wrote his MFA thesis on writing about the workplace. And the problem is, I can't do that because my workplace is pretty dull.
Yeah.
Now, but I do think it's something that's missing.
Mm. There are so many things in the book. I didn't get a chance to read it cover to cover, but it's a collection of essays that that expound on different types of craft, and kind of your experience and your take on that.
Mm.
You quote Voltaire, who said, "The secret to being a bore is to tell everything."
Right.
That's one of the conceptions we have. We think that we need to tell every single thing that we need to know about our characters. We need to know,
Yeah.
what flavor ice cream they like, or what their first kiss was, where they were.
Right.
Um, and that might not be off, that might not be true. Is that correct?
I think it's definitely not true. Unfortunately, Creative Writing Guide after Creative Writing Guide says you should know everything about the character that you're writing about. And several of them say you should know it before you write word one of your story. And my feeling is just the opposite. I don't want to pin somebody down so perfectly that they become a stereotype. I,
Mhm.
I, I want to give them some of the complexity that we have in real life in people.
When you say
And I think,
stereotype, are you also including composite with that as being similar or the same? You don't want to create a stereotype or maybe a composite?
well, I think that inevitably everything a fiction writer writes is composites.
Mm,
We're taking our own experience, the experience we've gotten from reading and watching movies and having conversations with people. And in the act of writing, we draw on all those things primarily unconsciously and create characters. But I know John Irving said, for example, that he doesn't write the first sentence of a novel until he knows what the last one will be. And
mm,
I have just the opposite approach. I start off with maybe a first sentence and then I see where I'm going to go from there.
mm.
And if I have a character who's in a situation that's stressful enough, I get to explore how they react to that situation. And I
Mm.
don't know how it's going to turn out until I'm well into the story.
Yeah, one of the things that writing students kind of wrestle with is this thing about, show, don't tell. One of the
Hmm.
things in your book that kind of resonated as kind of a mantra as I was reading it is this notion of don't report, render. Can you can you dive into that? Because I think, some of our listenership might be students, people that wrestle with just
Right.
that thing.
The biggest problem that I found in creative writing students and in myself when I was first a creative writing student is that we've spent our entire lives up to adulthood learning how to write expositorily, writing essays and making outlines and doing all these things that really have nothing to do with writing fiction or poetry or anything of that sort. So you have to kind of unlearn all sorts of things.
Mm.
The first act of creation is destruction. You have to destroy that first thought that comes to your mind, which is the cliche, and you have to keep pushing yourself to discover something new.
So the first act of creation is destruction,
Mhm.
which, you know, for that's very interesting because, as artists, we think of ourselves as creators, right?
Mhm.
The opposite of, creation's destruction, which is kind of like war, I guess, I guess, right? Make art, not war, right? Uh,
It's,
but
I
that's
think,
interesting.
think it's important to recognize that there's an awful lot of destruction involved in creating anything. If I say something like flat as a, the natural impulse is to think the word pancake or something of that sort.
Hmm.
If you write that, you're guilty of a cliche. And if you have um, a character who has red hair and you give him a fiery temper, you created a stereotype. Um, and you can create a stereotype plot too. Boy meets girl, girl. Boy loses girl, girl gets boy gets early. You get the idea.
Yeah, yeah.
Allen Ginsberg used to say first thought, best thought. And I think it's usually the worst thought.
Mhm.
And revision is frequently an act of destroying things that we've written. They may even liked at the time, but they find out that it doesn't really belong in the story.
You know, when you started your writing career, was revision something that, you saw as a necessary evil? I mean, some people really enjoy revision, other people kind of, it's kind of something that they don't want to, get into. How was your, feeling about revision?
I don't think there is any such thing as writing without revision. I mean, I can't compose a sentence without revising it. And the normal assumption that people have when they come into career writing class is that you write that first draft in sort of a constant flow of whatever is going through your mind. Um, and then you go back and revise it. But I think revision is a part of the process all the way through. You're questioning a certain word choice, you're questioning a decision to have a character do X or Y or Z. Um, and I mean, I've revised everything that I've written over and over again. One of the essays in Words Made Flesh is called The Flowers of Afterthought, and it's about revision. And the phrase comes from Bernard Malamud, who said he loves the flowers of afterthought. Revision is what gives us a chance to at least seem smarter and wiser than we actually are.
Yeah, yeah, no, I can relate. You know, there are a lot of wonderful quotes in Words Made Flesh. One of which that you cited was by Georgia O'Keeffe, who said that nothing is less real than realism. Can you talk about that? Because in one of the chapters, uh, you draw parallels with uh, writing and painting, yeah, expressionism or impressionism,
Mhm.
realism, and those things.
Right.
Um, can you talk about that?
Well, the problem with realism is that in most people's treatment, it's simply reportage. A detail is there because it was there in fact, or that it's, just part of the scene. Um, you have to be able to leave out what isn't essential. In one of the essays I talk about Catcher in the Rye, now the character Holden Caulfield is characterized by 7 details. That's it. And people read that book and they think they know this person. Um, so that's a trick. The more realistic we get, the more inessential material we include. The idea is to get at the essence of the character and the situation.
I think that's kind of like one of the main underlying themes, I guess, or focal points of your book is the notion of essence. I'm reading through the book and I'm thinking, wow, it seems like you're giving as much attention to what is not said as you are to what's being said, and
Right,
that all of this, all of this focus really is to get at the essence. And
right,
I guess the way a writer gets to the essence depends on who that writer is.
right.
How do you go about that? I mean, getting to, that essence.
Um, I, I think an ideal work of art doesn't contain a sentence or a word that isn't necessary. Um, I like novels, not as much as everyone else, but I like novels. But there isn't one that I don't think could be improved by lots of cuts. And, you know, William Blake talks about portraying the world in a grain of sand. Some people try to do it on a beach. They got all the sand that you can think of, every fact and detail, every social custom, every descriptive detail you can think of, and so forth. And to me, that actually moves us away from the essence. Um, so I think that's really the point for me. I'm drawn to poetry and short stories because they both have that as their standard. You try to not have anything that's there just for its own sake.
So there's an intention.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. with craft, um, I assume that, one's evolution towards craft is not a static thing. I remember reading a book by Raymond Carver called Fires, which included some essays,
Yeah,
and where he recounts a conversation that he had with John Gardner, who had been his teacher, I think, at Chico State College.
right.
They were having dinner. It was some event, but they were having dinner and they were talking, and then I think Gardner said something like, everything I taught way back then was probably wrong, probably wrong, right? Those many years ago. Tell us about your own journey towards understanding craft in terms of your own writing and teaching and how those things, there's an amplitude and in peaks and valleys.
Yeah, recently a former student of mine asked what title I would give my two craft books if they were published as a single volume. And my answer was everything I wish I'd known when I started writing. It's taken me 50 years to figure a lot of this stuff out. Part of it is because the conventional wisdom is so often misleading or just plain false, like that notion you need to know, what brand of underwear your character wears.
Yeah, right.
You don't need, that kind of advice is not helpful at all. And if standard phrases like show, don't tell make sense in certain places, but there are places where you should tell and not show. And the old thing, write what you know, seems to me a formula to bore yourself. You already know it. You're not discovering anything. I like what Grace Paley said. She said, you write from what you know into what you don't know. And
Mm,
that to me is the goal.
right from what you know into what you don't know.
All right.
So you're filling that space. I see. Yeah. No. So that's Grace Paley that said that.
Yeah.
Grace Paley. You know, I've read a few books on craft, and it just seems like, the opinions on different aspects kind of vary from book to book. Some tend to be censorious or rather stringent regarding the rules.
Mhm.
Words Made Flesh really seems to take more of a holistic and human approach. It doesn't seem so mechanical. It seems like it just kind of lends itself to opening up
Mhm.
possibilities. Was that a conscious choice, or was that
Absolutely.
over just a course of just your writing life where you come to these
Yeah.
conclusions?
It just seems to me that the creative writing guides almost inevitably tend to be prescriptive,
Mm,
as if the author has the answer. I try to be more of a descriptive writer, describing what has been done by writers past and present, um, what techniques they use and um, what's available for us. There's so many things that we don't use as fiction writers because we're um, led by the prescriptive approach to think that they have to be one way, that there's
mm,
only one kind of plot, there's only one way to create a character. And basically, what I'm trying to do is show what all the possibilities are.
mm.
It's a vast panorama. The title of my first craft book is Along with All That Could Happen, and that's the state that a writer is in. You're alone, and anything, literally anything could happen. Flying elephants, who knows?
Yeah,
Um,
the possibilities. Um, there were a couple of terms that you use in the book, um, one of which really popped out at me, and maybe you can speak on it. Homo sapiens versus Homo fictus.
mhm. Yeah, that's actually taken from E.M. Forster. E.M. Forster used those two terms, and he basically argues that Homo fictus needs to be as much like Homo sapiens as possible. So it's back to that notion you need to know everything about a character. Homo fictus is the essence of a character. As William Gass has said in one of his wonderful essays, there are many wonderful characters who've gone through the entire novel without a head, not
Mm.
been described, and we don't miss it. We don't need it. In some cases, we do need that description, but we don't always. So the main thing is to um, keep yourself open to the possibilities that will best serve whatever you're trying to do at a moment in the story.
Mm. Another point in the book, you said accumulated details don't bring characters to life; they flatten them
Yeah,
with their work.
absolutely.
Can you speak a little on that? Because I think, for writing students, that's important. Is
Mhm.
I think we tend to um, maybe overdo it. Um,
Yes, that is a natural tendency. They're trying to be complete. And they're trying to make a picture in the reader's mind equivalent to what we would see in a play or a movie or real life. And that it takes a long time to describe literally everything that happens in one gesture. In one of the essays, Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Abstraction, I have a long quote, um, Thomas Love Peacock, in which he describes one single little action, and it takes him about a page. And the whole point is to show that being that specific and being as lifelike or realistic as you want to put it is actually destructive. It's not helping you gather the character, a sense of the character, or um, what he's experiencing.
so there, I guess, has to remain a sense of mystery, a sense of space where the reader can enter, and I guess there has to be room for that. Otherwise, you're giving the whole thing away, right?
Yeah. I love something that Mary McCarthy once said. She had written an entire novel and then someone stole it. So she didn't have another draft. This is back before computer days.
Oh man, yeah.
And in an interview, she was asked why she had never rewritten it. And she said, because I already know how it ends. That you want to be in the same state as a reader when you're writing. To me, writing is a higher form of reading. You're writing to find out what's going to happen, what the characters are going to say, what they're going to do, whether things are going to work out or get worse. It's the old standby of William Faulkner's. He said that he didn't plan his novels. He just followed the characters around and wrote down what they said and did. Well, that's what the reader's doing, just
Hmm.
following what we're being told. And so the goal is to write like a reader, and have all sorts of possibilities in your mind about what might happen. And
It's interesting what you're saying about possibilities, because one of the things that Walter Mosley says in his writing process is he says that, you don't want to edit too much up front, because as you're getting to the middle and to the ending part of your book, he says the beginning of your book is still growing. He says you still have all of that possibility, which makes sense.
uh,
Um, we're gonna wrap up in a couple of minutes, but I wanted to ask you, as a teacher, I know that you taught at Arkansas, you taught at the low residency program. Um, if you felt that there were any differences between a low res teaching wise in a low res as opposed to a non-low res, and what are like maybe two or three of the most common issues that writing students have in your teaching experience?
well, first of all, I've vastly approve more of low residency programs than regular residency ones. I went to Syracuse in Iowa and thought I had an absolutely terrific education. And then I was asked to come teach at Vermont, and I realized after one residency and one semester of working with just five students out of the usual 40 to 60, that this was the way to learn. Not once in getting a master's in doctoral level in creative writing did I ever have more than two stories discussed in a semester. That's one packet in a low residency program. You could
Yeah.
get to read so much more to get so much more feedback, and you're really working on one-on-one with someone. And I like the fact that, and I don't know, can't speak for all low residency programs, but we did at Vermont was work out separate reading lists for each student
Yes.
that toward helping them accomplish their own goals. And sometimes that reading list would change because I'd see something and think, say, if you read this, maybe this will help and so forth. But the goal is to individualize the instruction. And in a regular kind of university structure, it's just the opposite. And so I much prefer it. My feeling is if I had known this when I was first applying to graduate schools, I would have applied to a low residency program, but they barely even existed at that time.
Mm. I know with some of the students that you were advising, some were, you know, short story writers and some were probably novelists. Was
Mhm.
there a marked, real difference between working with either that you found?
I almost everybody that I worked with in low residency program was a serious and talented writer.
Mm,
And pretty high standards for who we accepted into the program. In a regular undergraduate kind of program, you really can't pick that way. I mean, people show up and they decide to come and take your class, and some people are good at it and some aren't. Um, but what the biggest problem is that you can't work one-on-one with them all semester because you have so many students. So I really loved teaching at Vermont. And most of these essays in both of these books started as lectures
mm.
at the residencies.
I really appreciate the holistic approach
Mm,
and, just your experience in some of the
mm,
things that we kind of take as being set in stone and how you kind of upend some of these things. In the
mm.
dedication of Words Made Flesh, it's very simply put, for my students who taught me how to teach, which is which is really wonderful. And from the preface, you write the premise behind this book is the same as that behind my previous collection of essays on the craft of fiction, which is called Alone with All That Could Happen on Writing Fiction. In order to improve our fiction, we need first to recognize and understand the vast panorama of techniques and strategies available to us. Unfortunately, many creative writing textbooks and essay collections take a prescriptive rather than a descriptive approach to
Yeah.
matters of craft and thus restrict our sense of what's possible in fiction. Thank you
Uh,
so much, David. I really appreciate the fact that you wrote this book. And if there's any last words or any advice that you would give for our listeners who, outside of buy the book and read it and get what's in it, any last words
You
of
should buy one for yourself, buy one for all your friends, buy another one for random people you see on the street and their pets. Buy as many as you can.
all right, all right. Again,
Well, really, what it comes down to is, and it's a quote that I dearly love from um, Jean Reese, author of Why It's Sargasso Sea and other books. In her Paris Review interview, she says, listen to me, all of writing is a huge lake, and there are mighty rivers that feed that lake, like Tolstoy and Dostoevsky. And then there are others who are just trickles, like Jean Reese. Um, but the important thing is to feed the lake. And I think, um, you know, I think that the whole goal of these craft books is to help people feed the lake.
Hmm. Well, you mentioned Dostoevsky, and I know a lot of, his themes deal with spiritualism and just the conflict of being human. One of my favorite quotes from him is he says that you can tell the character of a man by the way he laughs. So if
Hmm.
a man has a good laugh, he's a good man.
Yeah.
And, having been, he was up in, what was it, Siberia, the prison, and I think he was going to be executed and he got a reprieve at the very last second. Hey, if anybody would know, my man would know. Again,
Mhm.
David Jauss, the wonderful book here, Words Made Flesh. I was recently in California, trip to the Bay Area, and I brought this on the plane with me. And so I spent my time at UC Davis at the coffee shop, diving into this. And then I said to myself, well, I need to get in touch with David and see if he wants to be interviewed on our on our program. Again, Words Made Flesh, the craft of fiction by David Jauss. Last name is spelled Jauss. Press 53 is the publisher, and they're out of Winston-Salem. David, finally, for people that want to get the book, how do they go about doing that?
Well, they can order it through all the conventional ways. You can order it at an independent bookstore. You can order it at Amazon, or you can order it directly from the press itself, which is, I think the best thing to do because it helps keep the press alive. So they just go to press53.com and
Press53.com. And do you have a personal website?
yes, it's my name without uh, any period or anything between the first and last name, and then um, .com.
So www.davidjauss.com, and that's spelled Jauss.
Correct.
Once again, David, thank you so much. Words Made Flesh, published by Press 53. That's www.press53, that's 53, press53.com. Um, Words Made Flesh, The Craft of Fiction by David Jauss. David, thank you so much for being with us. Again,
Thank you,
Tony
Tony.
Robles, and this is Listen and Be Heard for readers and writers.